We returned home a week later, and a week after that, the crusade team, Steve Canfield, who's here with us, was leading. The blue team from Life Action came to conduct the crusade in our church. On the middle Sunday of that week, I stood before my people on that Sunday night, having announced to them before that night my wife and I wanted to talk to them and tell them what God was doing in our life. By this time, everybody in the church knew that the preacher and his wife were having marital problems. Seemed like to us, everybody in Birmingham knew it, and that was my responsibility. I stood before my people that night and confessed my sin to them. I confessed every sin that I could think of that God had laid on my heart. I told the story, what God had done for us, and I closed by asking the church to forgive me. I sat down. Steve came to the pulpit quickly and asked me to come back, and stood beside me and said to the people, he said, "Folks, your pastor's asked you for forgiveness. He needs to know if you will forgive him." He said, "If you'd be willing to forgive your pastor, I want you to look him in the face. Pretend you're the only one here in this building and say out loud to him, 'I forgive you, Brother Don.'" It rumbled across our congregation, my people saying out loud, "I forgive you, Brother Don." I sat down. My wife came to the pulpit. She told her story from her vantage point. She confessed her sin. Her last word, "Church, will you please forgive me?" They needed no cue. They just rumbled, "I forgive you, Gene. I forgive you, Gene." She sat down. I came back to the pulpit and gave my resignation to the church. No one had mentioned the word resignation, only God. He was the only one who mattered. I knew that I had to step down and place the emphasis on the rebuilding of my marriage. And so I resigned the church that night. The next day, I had a burden to clear my conscience with Alabama Baptists, especially her pastors. God had given me a measure of visibility among them, and I wanted to clear my conscience with those preachers. We have an Alabama Baptist newspaper, weekly circulation, goes over thousands of homes across our state. I called the editor of that paper and asked him if he'd let me sell me a page of advertisement so I could print my apology to Alabama Baptist. He said he couldn't do that, but he would be willing to interview me and print an article about it if I'd be willing to do that. The next morning, Gene and I was in his office at 8 o'clock trying to explain to him what God was doing. It took us all morning, but he finally got on board, and he wrote the article that appeared in the first edition of that paper, month of March 1995. My picture on there, a story of humiliation, story of failure, but a story of God's incredible grace to reach down and take a man who's willing to fall on the rock and be broken. I thank God for that. I thank God for his grace. And I thank God for his kindness. I can't do it in 10 minutes or so, but I've given you the heart of it. I trust that you'll understand that we have not arrived. Don't you think we have? I don't know if I ever will this side of glory, but I want you to know that God, in his incredible grace, reached down and took a broken marriage, a broken home, salvaged a marriage, salvaged a home, salvaged a ministry. And in the passing of time, I came to realize that God wanted me to do this work that he had been preparing me for years, and that is to call God's people to revival. The first step being brokenness. I'm grateful that I was able to experience it. Will you pray for me that I will ever be willing to go and die a deeper death?